Well, it's a Saturday, and I've moved for the second time in as many months, and I think it's about time to set up a reloading room. The guy I'm renting the room from has pretty graciously let me have a room specifically for reloading, which we will call the armory. So here it is. I'm going to show you what I'm going to start with today, and hopefully by the end of the day I will have a flimsy shelf kind of converted into a functional reloading bench. So let's come on in. And I will try to be smooth and steady. So we'd like to have a cool badge on the door here, an old-timey script and kind of an arc that says the armory. Maybe I can get my brother to mill one out of brass, letter it in. So there is a shelf. This house was maybe built in the teens through the 30s, and it's interesting to me that they took the shelves in here and they even built trim and molding into their basement storage shelves. I can't imagine anybody doing that now. They put some effort into it and then overlooked weird stuff. It's kind of funny to me. So here's the shelf, which is currently piled up with mostly reloading gear and a vise. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is clear that off. Try to do a slower pan. The Legos are not for reloading. I'm going to extend it out the width of the 2x12 out to this line all the way down to about here. Let's get at it from this angle. So basically it will be about a foot wider. I believe I'm going to take right here a piece of plywood to give it some structural rigidity and sandwich it against this and screw it together. Probably from the inside just because I can get the screws there. I'm going to leave a place I can tuck a chair under right here, and this will be the main press. Let's try to set the camera back further. So about where that railroad tie anvil is, railroad iron anvil is where I want the press to be set up. So I'll leave a chair pocket just to the right of that reinforcement. I tend to leave my chair sitting kind of to the left of my press and look at the press from the left side instead of directly in front of me. I find that works better. I will keep my vise free to be able to clamp down where I want it and set up the other presses on a plank chunk so that I can move them around and clamp them where I want them. Probably what I usually like to have is a clear area on either side of my work area with brass coming in to the left and supplies and everything, and a small single stage press to the right of my progressive press that I can use for pulling bullets, or if I have to do an extra sizing station or something like that, then it's nice to have just a spare station. And I keep that on a board so I can just move it around and clamp it where I want it. It's okay if there's a little wiggle on something like that, but I like my main press to be rock solid. I will set up the shotgun reloading behind the door, and I will mostly do that standing. I kind of like to stand when I'm reloading, but this is a good height for being able to choose between standing or sitting. There's not a ton of width in here, so it isn't going to be super cozy, but it's not uncomfortable here either. The temperature in here is moderate. I don't see any signs of moisture problems in here. Some of the other basement rooms are maybe iffy in that regard. I'll keep some desiccant in here, and there's plenty of places to store stuff. So that's the next thing, is just clearing all this out into the hallway and starting to build. Okay, some progress has been made on the reloading room. Sorry for the noise of the heater. So as you come in here, you can see the benches there. I made it by reinforcing that pre-existing shelf and extending it outward. So I added this oak upright there, which will get a piece of plywood across the bottom of it to tie it up from lateral movement, and will also work as a shelf bracket. I am going to keep this area underneath here open for being able to slide my feet under, so I will try to keep that uncluttered. On this side of the dividing line, I'm going to build shelves at this height and this height, which will help separate out the stuff and make the space more usable. Up here, you'll notice I've added a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood to add rigidity and some solidity. It's a little bit bouncier than I would have hoped. I can always add more reinforcement on both planes. For some reason it wanted to warp downward here, and so I propped that up a little bit and pulled it apart. Probably going to add in a lateral rib going that way underneath and taper it so it won't hit my knees. I've set it up for the top edge is, I would say, 1 inch underneath my belt buckle, so I think that's a good working height for standing. I can sit on there with a taller chair and be comfortable working too, but I find when I reload or do things like projects, I want about that height, so that's what it's set up for. I can kind of store and stage things here. Now this board right here has the mounting pattern for my press and the bracket for the catch bin on the side, and I'm going to recess the bolts on the underside so they're completely flush with it and tie it down, and that will be cut off something like there. And the idea is, if you look at my vise here, it has a pad on it, and I have these screws all arranged in 10-inch grids. So what I will do is I will make either an 8-inch square or a 10-inch square grid pattern, and take some of this sheet iron here, or this strap. This is 1/4 inch by 1.5 or something like that, and I will drill and tap at 3/8/16 and put a couple holes in it and shoot up screws of this from the underside, and that way there will be 4 holes going through that are basically bolt threaded underneath the table. So like hole, 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 hole. And I have to decide what bolt pattern spacing I want, but maybe 10-inch square. Point is, I want it to fit inside a 2x12 but go around whatever press. And so each press will have a base like that, as will my vise and a couple other tools. And my work area will be right there. I find that to be the comfortable spot in the room. I want to rig up a light kind of directly over into the left of the press. It seems to be about the right place to see in between. Where the light is right now, where I'm standing, puts the work in shadow, as you see. So I need to move the light towards the wall and more vertical, or rather add an additional light. And so the next step, I think, for me right now is going to be build the shelf underneath there, and then drill and tap or cut this sheet iron into a couple strips and drill and tap it and screw it up from underneath so it's held solid, and that will basically be a fixed nut. So all I'll have to do is move 4 bolts real quickly to move presses around. So I've got my single stage press, my Lee Loadmaster, a Mac 600 something, or what is it? So, continuing the project here, I've made these 2 pieces out of scrap steel. This one is done as a chamfer for screw heads 3/8/16. I'm using a crappy Harbor Freight tap set. If you can get better, do so. This one is so cheap that it doesn't even have the fractional drill sizes, or I mean the numbered and fractional drill sizes for the taps and the lids, so I added them myself. Anyway, just figured I'd show that happening here real quick. So I've started this tap and got it as square as I could by hand. If I'm actually doing this kind of thing on a regular basis, I like to use a drill press to drill a block about 2 thou over the size of the actual threads on the tap, and or rather the pilot drill for the tap, and then I do that on a square cold rolled piece of metal, say about 1 inch thick or 1.5 inches depending on the hole size. And then when I drill my holes, they're all perfectly square, and then I have the one 2/1000 over the tap size, and that holds the tap square. The fewer the flutes, the better, is what I've found with taps. Gun taps start easier, cut quicker, so unless you need a bottoming plug tap, they're always the preferred solution. But sometimes what you have in your budget is terrible Harbor Freight taps, so that's what I'm using here. And for the sizes you actually use and wear out, you can replace the individual ones with better taps. Or maybe better yet, get a whole new set. But so far, I haven't had to do that a lot. These are good for occasional tapping of mild steel and non-ferrous metals. They're not going to last you too long for regular tapping of steel or anything hard. You know, if there's any weld slag in your tap hole, good luck. Let's do a quick visual and see that that's square. Might not appear so on the camera, but it looks pretty good here. So, if you're new to fabrication, with a tap, once the threads kind of bite and make their track, you want to do, about 180 degrees or less, and then back up. And I like to put oil directly on the flutes so it's kind of flowing down gradually as I go. Be very liberal with your oil, and it's really worthwhile to get actual tap fluid. I like the Red Label Tap Magic. The environmental stuff is nowhere near as good. It's noticeable how much longer the taps last and how much less likely they are to break. Anyway, this isn't super exciting to watch, but there you go. Now, the purpose of these is what I've essentially made is big nuts that I can take a couple drywall screws through, like so, and pin them from underneath the workbench. There we go, drywall screw. Hopefully that's in the field of view. And basically I can make as many sets of these as I want, and there I can move any press, vise, or anything that I've made a base plate with 8-inch square holes in it, or 8-inch square hole pattern, and run it down to these nuts without having something sticking up from the bench and without having to reach underneath and put a new nut in place every time. So that's the thinking. Okay, here. So what I'm trying to show right now is I've got the mounting block mounted roughly where I want it. I didn't have the 3/8 16 by 4-inch bolts I want. Now here what I'm going to do is take a transfer punch. I'm holding this where I want it. And I'm going to press firmly with the transfer punch and not wiggle the press itself. And I failed on the not wiggling part, but I think we'll be okay. Now that gives me 3 distinct marks, one there, and one there where I can drill. And I'm going to circle those with a pencil once I figure out where I set it. Just making these deeper with a screw so I can find them again. And I've got some bolts which I'll run up from the underside and countersink so they fit flush. So we've got this hole pattern now transferred. Now one thing I just noticed a second ago is this little dump slide will run into the edge of my bench. So I'm going to have to put a little cutout on the rim to allow that to open. No big deal. Just something to be aware of. Your system may work differently. Here's the pencil. So there's a hole there, there, and there. And I'm going to drill them out vertically for 1/4 20. And I've got some 1/4 20 bolts which will fit flush there when I countersink them from the underside. I can already see that I'm going to have to correct these holes a little bit for the bolts to line up. That was expected. That's what you get when you're drilling without a drill press. But I'll make sure that the plates are true and the wood holes can be over drilled above them. Preferably not too much. Okay, so I've got the strips underneath. I'm just going to tighten these down and I've started the threads. So what I'll do is tighten them down so I know the bolts go in the way I have them aligned. Yes, I realize the tolerance issue with this, but I kind of rather true all the other blocks to this than to exact threads anyway. Okay, so I'll give you a quick pan across the basic layout of the bench. It's not 100% done, but it's done enough to give you an idea of the idea. So, this single stage press I have clamped in roughly the location it will be. I'm currently standing about where I would reloading. If you pan this way, there's a bunch of clutter on the bench. There's the mech, and there's the vise, and an anvil, all of which will get their own base out of the 2x12. And as I can, I will add more of the mounting points underneath the table. I've got a couple still pictures coming up because the video just wouldn't give good images of the mounting bracket. You might be able to buy nut fixtures like that rather than make them from scratch, but I showed you how I did it. And the last thing I wanted to show you is this shaded area right here is where I will need to cut out to allow clearance for the primer dump slider on the bottom of this press ram. Your press might not need that, but if you have a lead loadmaster you do, just depending on how much thickness you have here. Anyway, oh, one thing, I actually faced it with the 2x4 for a reason. I wanted this soft edge to be where I was putting my wrist, not the sharp edge of a piece of plywood. And underneath you can see the nut hardware there actually, so it's turning up okay on this video, so I'll call that good. Build your own, be creative. I'm open to suggestions for modifications of what I've got. Have fun.